Hey guys, Nintendrew here. When a game you've been looking forward to never makes its way to store shelves, it's easy for us as gamers to ask why. Was the game cancelled due to a dwindling budget? Or maybe the game was released in Japan but never made its way to other regions? Or perhaps the title was snuffed out before release by the Illuminati. Regardless of the reason, it's always disappointing to have to miss out on one of these lost titles. So with that in mind, I've done a little research. Today I'll be counting down through 5 lost Nintendo games which have been rediscovered or preserved and can actually still be played today, either by means of a later port, through emulation, or with a reproduction cartridge. So put on your detective cap and join me as we take a look at these forgotten relics of times gone by. Let's check it out. Okay, first up is Dragon Sword 64. Dragon Sword was a 3D hack-and-slash game developed by Interactive Studios, the team behind the Glover series. The game was planned for release in the first half of 2001, but was cancelled before launch due to issues with the studio's publisher. Nearly 10 years later, on April 9, 2010, forums across the web were ablaze with information of a leaked ROM of Dragon Sword 64, which was provided by an anonymous collector. The ROM in question contained a beta build of the game with nearly all planned features intact. Today, that ROM can be found relatively easily and played through an emulator or on real hardware with a flash card. Next up is Resident Evil for the Game Boy Color. Not to be confused with Resident Evil Gaiden, which was a top-down shooter that did eventually launch. This earlier prototype was a much more ambitious attempt to capture the full Resident Evil experience on the Game Boy Color. Just like its PlayStation sibling, the game featured pre-rendered environments and survival horror gameplay. The game was reportedly about 90% complete before it was canned, and a ROM compiled from the last known source code was uploaded in 2012. Like the other titles on this list, the game can be played today through emulation. Alright, you knew this one was coming. Star Fox 2. Star Fox 2 was a direct sequel to the original Star Fox that was cancelled at the very end of its development. You may have heard me discuss this title in my recent video about 3D Super Nintendo games. For years, the game was only playable through a fan-translated unreleased beta, but as you may have heard, it's just been announced that it's finally going to see an official release for the first time with the Super Nintendo Classic Edition console. Now that is a long development cycle, over 20 years in the making. Next is Animal Crossing for Nintendo 64. Otherwise known as Animal Forest, Animal Crossing was originally planned for the 64. Nintendo had planned to launch the game for the 64 disk drive add-on, as it would have relied on the disk drive's internal clock to control the game's progression of time. However, because of the disk drive's failure in Japan, the game was released as a standalone cartridge and never made it stateside. The game, of course, would eventually find its way to the GameCube in America in the form of an upgraded port. Last but not least is BS The Legend of Zelda. This version of The Legend of Zelda was only available through the Japan-exclusive Satellaview system. The game was an upgraded port of the original Legend of Zelda on the NES. Unlike the other titles on this list, which were cancelled before release or heavily modified before launch, this game did see an official release, but was only available for an extremely limited time through the defunct download service. Using the Satellaview add-on, gamers could download the game and save it onto a BSX broadcast cassette. The game was separated into 2 maps with 4 chapters, each of which was playable for just a few hours on a single day between August of 1995 and January of 1996, with just a few days of encore broadcasts due to high demand. Fortunately for us, the ROMs were able to be preserved, and some incredibly resourceful gamers have made these 2 new Legend of Zelda quests available for anyone to play today, either through emulation or with a reproduction cartridge. Also worth mentioning here is another later Satellaview exclusive title, The Legend of Zelda Ancient Stone Tablets, which plays like a direct sequel to A Link to the Past and has also been recovered for the gaming community. Alright guys, that's all I've got. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you've heard of any of these lost titles and which ones are your favorites. I'll be sure to read as many as I can, and I'd love to hear about it. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to Nintendrew for all sorts of cool gaming content, and feel free to share the video with any friends who might find it interesting. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye! Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, here are a couple more videos you might like as well. I also want to let you know I've launched a Patreon page. If you enjoy my content and would like to get early access to my videos, as well as some other exclusive rewards, feel free to head over there and check it out. See you next time!